Liz Kinnon. I'm speechless. I'm so excited. I'm so fired up. What a blessing to have you on Jazz Piano Skills. I just can't. I'm speechless. And that, believe me, Liz, that's hard to do, to make me speechless.
Well, I'm flattered. And that's easy to do.
Well, listen, mistakes are glorious. Mistakes are glorious. I know we tell our students that because through our mistakes we learn, right? But
embrace the glitches.
Embrace the glitches. And it was my mistake that led to our relationship. And it's just mind blowing to me. So for the listeners, I'll just fill them in here real quick. You had just casually reached out to me, sent me an email. I had sent out on a standard Saturday where I send out these tunes to all the listeners and subscribers. I sent out, I think it was Blue Bossa. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. It was.
And the play along was all messed up. Something was, it was like it was looping halfway through the tune, leaving half the tune off or something like that. And you were just so kind. You were just so gracious. You sent an email that said, hey, Bob, just FYI, the play along, the backing track on Blue Bossa has got some glitches in it. And sure enough, I went and I listened. I said, oh, my gosh, and fixed it. And then you and I started just kind of emailing back and forth. I thanked you, and you emailed me back. And something, I don't know, something in those emails, I said, who is this Liz Kinnon chick? Who is this girl? Who is
Pointing
this
out
girl?
my mistakes.
Right. Who is she? And so I just did a little quick, I stalked you. I did a little.
Gotta be careful.
I know it. I did a little Google search on you, and my jaw hit the floor because I started reading your bio and realized Liz is doing everything that I've ever dreamed about doing as a professional pianist and an educator. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she even took the time to email me and make me aware of my mistakes. And so I read your bio and I couldn't believe it. And so then I immediately shot back an email to you and said, Liz, you have to come on Jazz Piano Skills. Will you please do that? And again, you were kind and gracious enough to say yes. And so here we are. I'm just blown away. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you. My ego needed a boost right about then. And I will just say, to clarify, that it's very rare that I would listen to a whole backing track. But as an educator, of course, I'm always looking for better backing tracks and backing tracks that will help my students.
Yeah, right.
So I see Blue Bossa and I think, how many billions of times have I said? But for whatever reason, I thought maybe this is a better one than I've ever heard. And I listened, I go, this is a really nice backing track. I'm listening, and it got to almost the end, and it looped back to the beginning. I thought, was that me? So I listened again, same thing. And then I said, well, I bet this guy really puts out some nice material, really material that's fantastic material. And I know how much time it takes to prepare material in a very clear, concise way. Believe me, I know how much time that takes. I think the last thing that guy needs is me pointing out something that isn't right. So I think I'm first going to let him know how great his materials are, and they are. They're really, really wonderful. But he probably would like to know that this track isn't quite right. So that's why I wrote you the note, and that was the only reason. It was a complete fluke that I would have even listened to it. So I feel like it was a wonderful connection made through that.
Oh my goodness, it's absolutely fantastic. And so yeah, we embrace our mistakes and good things come from them. And look at this. Now we have our friendship and relationship, and I'm thrilled to death. So, okay. So with all that being said, I want you, because we're going to get into your bio, your professional background, all that, all your incredible, amazing accomplishments. And then of course we're going to get into the education side and teaching as well. But to start, I want to turn the microphone over to you, and I want you just to start at the very beginning, Liz. I want you to go back to your childhood, how you got into music, your parents, siblings, all that kind of stuff. I know you grew up in the Los Angeles area. So anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to give you the microphone and tell us your story.
All right. Well, feel free to cut me off if I go too far with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in Redondo Beach. And in the LA area, and my parents were kind of free spirits in all the right ways, very liberal in a fairly conservative neighborhood. Definitely loved the arts. Neither of them played an instrument, although my mother was very musical. She sang, she whistled, and she said that she taught herself to play the piano as a kid just to spite her parents. But we didn't have a piano. We really didn't have money, and it was still smoke and mirrors till the day she died. My mother said, I don't know how we managed to live in that area. You know, she was a self-employed writer, and my father had his own business. And they split up when I was 11. I think I was about 11, but it was a very amicable divorce, and they were very close always. And they both just wanted us to do whatever made us happy. So I have 2 younger brothers. The 3 of us are very close. We were all very close with both my mom and my dad. And my mom took me to, well, us, I guess, as kids. At some point, I was probably about 11. To a friend's house, and there was a piano, and I started to play a little bit by ear, completely by ear, poking around. I knew nothing. And somebody there noticed that I had a good ear. And they asked me, do you play the piano? And I said, no. But somehow it got into me that somebody thought that I had some sort of talent or something. So it sort of like planted a seed in there. And then I discovered rock and roll and pop music. And honestly, I discovered Leon Russell. And I said, oh boy, I want to play like that guy. But we didn't have a piano. So at the time I was doing a lot of babysitting. Yes, it was a problem. So I was doing a lot of babysitting. I was about 14 or 15, and I was doing a lot of babysitting, and I saved up my money, my babysitting money, and I bought an old funky upright piano. Wow. And it didn't fit in the door of the house, so a friend had to take the window frame off of my bedroom and somehow get it through the window into my room. And so I had a piano in my room, and I would mess around on it. I couldn't read. But before that, even I was very interested in music and playing, and there was an old lady that lived down the street named Dorothy. She lived alone, and she had a piano. She liked me, and she let me come over and play her piano. And that was when I realized I need to have a piano. And as I said, my mom was just trying to put food on the table. So I got the piano, and right about that time, my mom, who was a writer, decided she wanted to write her first book. She had done a lot of articles for magazines and all kinds of stuff. She wrote copy. She did anything that would honestly put food on the table. Right. And she decided she wanted to write a biography, and she loved the arts, and she decided her first biography was going to be about Stan Kenton.
Wow.
Of all people, right? So I'm like, wow. Stan who? Give me Leon Russell, give me Led Zeppelin, Carole King, James Taylor, Crosby, Stills and Nash. And who's this guy? So she started doing her research, and part of her research was she went to a clinic of his at Redlands, and she took me. And there was something about that music and about that whole thing that really, really lit a fire in me.
Wow.
And there was really no turning back. I got out of, I guess I was in my senior year of high school. She wrote the book. It's called Straight Ahead, The Story of Stan Kenton. It's a fantastic biography. Wow. And she went on to write 3 other biographies that were all very, very well researched, a lot of integrity in writing them and all.
Yeah.
So
can we still get our hands on that book?
Yes, I think it's out of print, but you can find it or get it from the library or from
okay,
yeah, something like that. Anyway, I imagine you're interested in Stan Kenton, and she traveled on the bus with the band. She interviewed. She had some wild stories about all of that, but.
Well, just FYI, Stan Kenton, right? I did my master's and doctorate degree at the University of North Texas, and Stan Kenton left his entire library to UNT, to North Texas, and the big jazz performance hall at North Texas is called Kenton Hall.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well, so growing up in the household I did with her typing away on her typewriter, that biography, and sometimes she would leave for a few days to travel and interview somebody, and it was very, very well researched and written with, as I say, a great deal of integrity. Stan didn't like the book because it was an honest book. It didn't tell everything, but it didn't say that he was a saint. So it was an honest book.
Yes.
And so from there, I was a senior in high school. I had all my credits. So I got to go to the local community college for some classes in the afternoon. And what classes did I decide to take? Survey of Jazz. And I decided to try out for the jazz band.
Wow.
Well,
Okay, now stop there for a second. So up to this point right now, if I am hearing you correctly, you haven't had any formal training or lessons at all. All. This is all you in your bedroom with this old piano that you purchased through, saving up through babysitting and such.
right.
That was kind of like your tablet, your computer at that time. You were just addicted to it, just playing on it, trying to figure things out by ear.
Exactly.
So no formal training. So
Exactly.
Here we go. You graduated from high school, and we're at college now.
Yeah, well, I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school. Right. And right about that time, I found out about a teacher who lived not too far. He rode a motorcycle and he was really cool. And somebody said, why don't you get this guy? And my mom said she would scrape together the $30 for the guy to come and give me a lesson. But there was absolutely nothing to do with technique, nothing. He taught me some cool stuff, and great. He came for probably, I don't know how long he came, six months or something, but no, I didn't have formal training. Wow. And I decided I wanted to play in the jazz band at El Camino College, and I tried out, even though I got in because nobody else auditioned. That was why I got in. Now, I still might not have gotten in, except that I played with really good time, and I knew chords. I could sort of improvise, but I could not read notes. I mean, really, I really could not read notes. I knew FACE, but I couldn't read. But I had,
right.
I feel like there are some things that I was not given a gift for, but two things that I think have been absolutely critical in my career and everything is good time and a good touch. So now, I feel very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it Evel Knievel that taught you the chords, or? You know who Evel Knievel is, so I could say that.
That was an excellent segue there. He did teach me some chords. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Good.
In a basic way, and then I just became I just was thinking all the time about stuff, and I would be on the bus and I would think, wow, an augmented triad, and I'd be thinking about augmented triads. And I realized, oh my God, an augmented triad, that's symmetrical. And that means that any one of these three notes could be that. So I started just making connections and putting stuff together because I have a math brain too. And so I played in that jazz band and I did my homework, man. I came home and I wrote the names of those notes, and I could get by all right, except if it was something like a bassy straight ahead kind of bassy straight ahead, the chart. And then I realized, there's a few spots here that I really need to nail. And other than that, I can get by with my feel and my sort of kind of improvising. Right. So then I started working on reading. And to this day, I'm not a great reader, but as far as notes go and vertically and stuff like that. But so I did that for a while. And then after my senior year, because I was doing that at the same time as I was finishing my senior year of high school. So at the end of that year, the teacher, survey of jazz, in that semester, I took survey of jazz. So I was probably the youngest one in the class. I was still in high school. But the teacher of that class at El Camino College was Dr. Tom Owens, who was a brilliant, kind, generous man who did his dissertation for his PhD on Charlie Parker. So he was very quiet, but he knew his stuff, and he took an interest in my interest, and I started learning. The survey of jazz class was fantastic, just taking us through the history of jazz. And when he hit bebop, I just about exploded in that room. I had never really heard that before, because Stan Kenton, that wasn't bebop. No, that's what I had heard at the clinic. The other stuff I heard, it really wasn't bebop. But when Dr. Owens played bebop, there was something about that just grabbed me, just absolutely blew my mind. So
Yep.
he took me on as an independent study student, and I started transcribing solos. And it was very, as I'm sure you remember, it was very, very tedious at the time. And I
Oh
either
my
did it
goodness.
using the phonograph needle, one hand picking it up and finding it here and picking it up, or a cassette recorder, which I would stop and then pick
Yep.
that up.
Did you happen to have the Marantz cassette
I
recorder with?
I was just about to
Did,
say until I got the Marantz machine where you could put it on
wasn't
half.
that wasn't that a lifesaver?
Who needs Christmas? That was just magic that it didn't
Yes.
take it down an octave,
Yes.
right? So I
Correct.
used that until it wore out. And then I just started trying to do things just at full speed. I
Yeah.
mean, not super fast stuff, but
Yeah. Right. Right.
And
Right.
so yeah, Dr. Owens so at the end of that year, he announced that they were going to have a 2-week free jazz camp because it was the first time they were doing it up at College of the Redwoods, which is in Northern California,
Wow.
Eureka.
Right.
2 weeks, live there. There were 4 instructors, and they were all jazz educators. I didn't know anything, really. But I thought, for free? Wow. Hey, Mom, I'd like to go to this free jazz camp. She goes, go, have fun, learn all you can. So I went.
Right. The price is right. Do
I
it.
had to pay for my plane ticket to get up there. And bless his heart, one of the instructors came and picked me up from the little Arcata airport and took me there. And for 2 weeks, I was immersed in really what jazz education's about. And I had never, ever, ever had any experience like that.
Wow.
It was really great where you're living with people. And at that time, I also, it was great for every reason. But one of the most important things I got out of that was that so I was the least experienced person. They put you in groups, they
Right.
place
Right.
you in
Right.
this group, the
Right.
green group and the white. They don't say the best and the worst, but I was in the least experienced group. But there was a guy there that was, I think he was 1 year older than me. And he absolutely blew me away. He could play any style. He had I guess you'd say, a phonographic memory. He could play anything. He could play any style. And he was about my
Wow.
age, maybe a year or two older than I was. And he was the nicest person ever. So fantastic in every way. And it turned out that one of the 4 teachers for that camp was John Prince from Cal State Long Beach. They had a great program at the time.
Right.
And he just grabbed that guy and said, you're going to come to college. I think he definitely made him a very nice offer. And that guy, to this day, I just saw him a couple days ago. His name is Jim Cox. Jim Cox is a studio piano player, he's to this day one of my favorite pianists in the world. And he would be so embarrassed to hear me say that because he's that kind of guy. But anyway, I realized that somebody my age, somebody like me, could really learn to play. And he's like 1 in a million. But
Right.
I
Right.
was introduced to the fact that, whoa, this is what can happen. So that was a great experience. I came home and I just realized that I better take some lessons. So I still no technique lessons and ever. And, but there was a guy in LA at the time named Charlie Shoemake. He moved out of LA now, but he was the guy people went to study bebop improv. And lots and
Okay.
lots and lots and lots of people went to him. So I went to him and I got what I could from him. And at the time, he was the right guy for me. And I learned a lot. And most of that had to do with, he had transcribed solos, hundreds and hundreds of solos. So every week you go and you learn some voicing. I learned some voicings from him and I would play the transcribed solo that he had transcribed. And he would say, pick a phrase and play it in every key. He didn't call them licks, he called them phrases. And
Nice.
and then play good voicing. And one of the great things he said to me, he said, my goal is for you to never play a dumb chord. So that had to do with voicings, like a dumb voicing. So
Yeah. Right. Right.
I say that to my students now. They don't,
Yeah. Right.
always accomplish that. But so I started with him for a while and I was just doing gigs and just whatever. And I was living in a house with three Canadian guys that had moved down to LA to study at the Dick Grove School of Music. I don't know if you are familiar. Okay.
Very,
So
very
that was
familiar.
out in the valley. I lived at the beach.
Right.
I was in a disco band with two of those guys, and they said, we need a roommate. And I said, what, I'm going to move into this house with three guys? And they go, and I was still living at home with my mom and my brothers. And they said, oh, well, we really need a roommate. And I said, well, no. And then they said, well, we'll give you the master bedroom with your own bath. And I looked at them and I said, was there any question that if I did this, that I would have the master bedroom with I mean, it's three guys and me, you know? So but I grew up with brothers, and I was always sort of
Right.
a tomboy, and I was
Right.
already doing gigs, always with guys. I was very
Right.
comfortable. So I
Right.
thought,
Right.
go out there and live, Okay, so I
Right.
did. So I lived with
Right.
these three guys that were musicians that came down from Vancouver, Canada to study at the Dick Grove School. So I went over to the Dick Grove School. I thought, ooh, this looks pretty great. I met
Right.
Dick Grove. I took a class in harmony, and I was absolutely addicted. I mean,
Yeah, right.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
talked to Dick, and he hired me to work in the office, the front office. Worked in the front office for a while. I took another harmony class, and I was really addicted. And somebody said, you should apply for an NEA scholarship, National Endowment for the Arts. I
Yeah.
said,
Right.
so I had written a couple of tunes, and I had written a very, very bad big band chart. I didn't know what I was doing. I really did not know what I was doing, but I had a good sense
You
of
right. You had to
rhythm.
start.
I had a really good sense of rhythm and could write hip phrases, but I didn't know how to orchestrate them. So I had the trombones in unison. I mean, it was terrible, but the ideas were good. So I
Right.
sent this thing away along with some letters of recommendation, including one from Phil Cohen, who was a Dr. Phil Cohen from Concordia University in Canada. He used to come down to LA to give that's a whole other story, but he was a very, very, very special man, an educator, and unique person in every way. And I was really lucky to get some sessions with him. And so I threw the stuff out there. I sent in the application. A few months later, somebody came into the office and said, oh, congratulations. And I said, what? And because I was about 21 or 2. And they said, oh, I read that you got an NEA grant. And I went, a what? I had forgotten that I didn't know.
Right.
Well, I got the grant, and I had applied to do the 1-year composing and arranging program with Dick Grove. And they gave me the grant. And
Oh
I
my
paid the
goodness.
whole thing, 1 year. So I was teaching
Wow.
there. No, I'm sorry. I was working there in the office. I was doing the program, and it changed my life. Dick
Oh, I
Grove, as
bet.
an educator and a person, changed my life as a
Wow.
musician, from a
Wow.
career, as an educator, even though I was not teaching at the time yet at all. But I really learned a lot from him, and he took me under his wing a little bit, very nice. And after I finished, he offered me a job as his TA, which was I'm getting paid to really assimilate this stuff. He was phenomenal, really.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
so then he asked me to teach for him, and I did that, and then I would continue to do gigs and write arrangements. And where do you want me to stop here?
Oh my God. Well, this is you have kind of your story. I mean, you realize this, right? You defeated the odds here because growing up, uh, getting a piano late in your life, poking around on that piano without any formal training or guidance or instruction until high school, late high school, and then having everything kind of unfold for you after that with the connections and ending up with you defeated the odds because if you told me your story without telling me the ending, if you just kind of set up your story at the beginning, I would say that you were probably an accountant now, doing something totally different than music because the odds are that it would not turn out like it turned out for you. It's a miracle.
Well, you're right. I feel very, very lucky. I did leave out one of the most important pieces of the puzzle that I just remembered. I was so lucky that as a late teenager, when I did get the piano and I did get into jazz, I lived in Redondo Beach, approximately 12 minutes from the lighthouse in Hermosa. The lighthouse, right? So the lighthouse being, I'm sure anybody that watches this will know about the lighthouse, but it was the jazz club on the West Coast. Right. And everybody would go through LA to the West Coast and they would play at the lighthouse. I mean, everybody. I saw everybody. Every Wednesday night, they had ladies' night. So this was, sorry, guys, but you could call it discrimination. But on Wednesday nights, if you were female, there was no cover charge. You had to buy your drink minimum. I was far from 21. So I went, no cover, every Wednesday for a couple of years. Yeah. No cover charge. I would buy my 2 Shirley Temples and, or, 7-Ups or whatever. And I would sit there. I went alone.
Wow.
At the time, the lighthouse, there was a stage and there were pews, kind of like church pews, facing, I mean, the stage was on one side and the pew, anyway, it was sort of like an L shape facing, it was a very small club. And I would sit in the pews. I would have my religious experience, or I would sit in the bar. But I had a chance, honestly, I had the opportunity to see the greatest. Everybody came through there, along with guys that lived in LA that played there somewhat regularly, like Blue Mitchell and Harold Land played there. Oh, man. They probably played there every few months, or LA guys. But the other guys that came through, I mean, everybody would come through. And I sat and I listened to the music and I was inspired. But one of the most important things, besides just getting the language and getting the phrasing and getting all of that in my head, was seeing the interplay of the musicians.
Right.
And I never thought about it. I just internalized it from watching, and I didn't realize until many years later, honestly, what an impact that made and why I was always so comfortable playing in a group.
Right.
More so than playing solo. To this day, I would much rather play in a group than play solo piano.
Right. Well, that's a big piece of the puzzle for your life as well, right?
Yeah.
Talk about being in the right, growing up there in that area, that Redondo Beach area, and then having access there to the club and hearing all the great players. I mean, you were just kind of immersed in it. I mean, it was just all around you. So, I mean, what a blessing,
It was
absolutely amazing. So, okay, so now let's talk about, now that we kind of have an idea of your background. Okay, your story just gets even
weirder.
No, I was actually going to say more amazing. It just gets more amazing because your professional accolades just absolutely blow my mind. Like, you played with Dizzy Gillespie?
Well, I would love to tell you that he called me to do that. He didn't call me to do it, but I did play with him because I was playing in a group at the time, and we got hired to play on a jazz cruise. And we were one of 4 groups, maybe. And Dizzy was hired to play on the jazz cruise. And Sandy Graham, singer Sandy Graham.
Yep.
And so we did our own sets, but then we also played with Dizzy. He didn't bring a band. He came to play. Right. So they said, oh, well, this group, the group that I was in at the time was called the Jazzbirds, and Stacy Rolls, trumpet player, and Betty O'Hara, who played trombone and horns. We and a bass player, drummer. So we got to play with Dizzy. We played his set with him every night that he played, and that was great. Oh my gosh.
Well, that's a dream come true there. I mean, holy moly.
It was. He didn't kick me off the bandstand, so I figure I did okay.
Well, they don't come any bigger than Dizzy Gillespie. No, they just don't come any bigger than that. So,
no.
Okay, what about all the stuff you're doing in Hollywood? Oh my gosh, all this movie stuff. Are you kidding me? Like the La La Land experience with Ryan Gosling? Okay, talk to us about that, because I'm reading everything that you're doing there. How did all that happen?
Well, I was a player. I am a player. But I was predominantly a player at that time, doing some arrangements that came up. If I was in a group and I wanted to do something, I would just do an arrangement, doing all stuff like that. And I did teach at the Dick Grove School for at least 10 years, while I was doing gigs and other stuff. And then the school closed, and then I was freelancing again, doing gigs and various other things, music preparation and stuff like that. And then I started teaching at the Colburn School in Los Angeles, which is a performing arts school, very fine, wonderful place, and I'm still there. And somebody called, one of the producers for La La Land called and spoke with the assistant dean at the time and said, can you recommend a piano coach for our actor? We're going to be doing this movie that is featuring a jazz pianist, is going to be the lead role. And she thought of me and she told them to call me. So I answered and I found out a little more about it. And just to kind of cut to the chase, I spoke with a few people and they said, why don't you go meet with him and see how it feels? And I said, okay, great. So I went and met with him and we talked for a while and he said, have you ever coached, I'm talking about Ryan right now. Have you ever coached an actor for a film on piano? And I said, no, I have not, but I have no doubts that it will work fine because first of all, I am a jazz pianist. Second of all, I've been teaching for a very long time. And third, I grew up in Los Angeles, and that film is an homage to LA as much as it is an homage to jazz. So we talked about a lot of things. We talked about kids. We talked about, and he gave me a thumbs up, and they hired me, and so we started working. And that was a very intense, the biggest gig of that type that I've had, and it was my first. So I learned a lot, and the music team was fantastic. Really, the music supervisor and the music producer and everybody and the director, they really helped me to make it very, very successful, and it was, and I'm very proud of it. After that, I got a lot of calls from people asking if I could teach them to play jazz piano in 3 months. And they yes. We were that successcul at the So
well, I'm signing up for that class, Liz.
I am too.
Okay.
So after that, though, I got calls from other people to do the same thing, and now I've worked with probably, I think I just finished with maybe the 13th act working on something like that to prepare. Really, it's preparing an actor for a role that includes playing the piano, and this is for an actor that really doesn't play. So we as musicians take a lot for granted, but the whole point is to prepare them to be a professional in that role and to be ready for it. So that's what I do.
Wow. Well, how cool is that? I mean, just really, how cool is that? That's awesome.
It's a real quirky niche.
Yeah, it's awesome, right? So listen, before we get, because I want to start talking about some jazz education with you as well. But before we do that, I want you to talk about misbehaving.
Oh, well, thank you, Ms.
Yeah, what a great. Yeah, what a misbehaving. Okay, what a great,
very liberating.
Great. You're right. What a great CD! What a great recording! So, oh my goodness, I've been listening to it. I've been binging on it and loving it. So, talk a little bit about that project, and I want everybody listening. You got to go check it out, right? It's out there, Amazon Music, Spotify, I mean everywhere, right?
And even a hard copy.
And even a hard copy as well.
Yeah, through CD Baby.
So, talk about that, because it's got everything: Brazilian, Latin, bebop, the whole 9 yards. So talk about that project and that recording.
Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. Yes, I have one CD out, and I finally did it some years ago. It took a long time to do it because it was interrupted by having 2 kids and working and running out of money and running out of time and all that. But I did finally finish it. So I played all kinds of music: pop, jazz, bebop, all kinds of stuff like that, contemporary music. And then came the day my life changed and I heard Afro-Cuban music. And I had that same electricity feeling as I did when I had heard bebop back in Dr. Owen's class. I heard Afro-Cuban music in my Dick Grove class on composing and arrangement, the program I did one day. he did Afro-Cuban, and he brought a guy in who played stuff and talked about the pieces as they, meet together, the pieces
Right.
of the puzzle in the music, the parts. And
Right.
I was just mesmerized. And I remember Dick walked by me and he said, "I can see the gears turning in your head." And I just was
Right.
fascinated. It was the
Right.
syncopation and it just grabbed me. So I said, okay, I have to learn a little something about this. So I learned more than a little something about it, and I listened a lot, and I learned my little piano montunos, and I learned all that stuff on my own. And
Wow.
then I did a rehearsal band that wasn't Latin, that was just a big band. And a guy there said, "Oh, I have a gig." This guy, Bobby Redfield, he was playing with, our piano player has to leave. And I wonder if you want to join the gig. It's Afro-Cuban Latin jazz. And
Okay.
the piano player at that time was Charlie Otwell, who was playing with Poncho Sanchez, and he was getting too busy. So I go, yeah, I'd be interested. So the leader said, go to Charlie's house and have him check you out to make sure that you can,
Right.
So I said, well, I really want to be in a group like this. I practiced my montunos. So I go to Charlie's house, and Charlie, well, he was great and played a little bit. And then he said, yeah, sure, you can do the gig. So I got my piano, Rhodes in the car, and I go down to the gig, and I walked in, and I knew my friend, the percussionist, Kurt, at the time, was doing the gig, and Bobby, but I didn't know who else was playing. And I
Right.
walked in, and sitting there, setting up, was Poncho Sanchez and his bass player and drummer, which were the Banda brothers at the time. This was the gig that night. So I said,
Wow.
whoa, okay.
Wow.
So I set up my stuff, and we started playing mambo, and Poncho kept turning back, going, one, one. So I was fine doing my montunos by myself, but when I was in the group with the bass playing not on one and all that stuff, I wasn't there,
Yeah. Right.
And it took about then all three of those guys were yelling one, one. So, they could have been really horrible to me, and I would have deserved it, but they were so nice. And honestly, about the third mambo we played, something clicked,
Uh huh.
and I got it. It was just, I got it. I
You
understood
locked
where the
in.
jigsaw
Right.
pieces went that fit together. I just got it. And I was in that band. Poncho had his own band, so he didn't play in the band very often, but I was in that band for probably 3 or 4 years. And then
Wow.
somebody heard me in that band and they said,
Wow.
we have a Brazilian gig. Do you, and I said, well, I haven't played Brazilian yet. That sounds good. So I went and I did this Brazilian gig, and the guys said, oh, we're going to start a trio of Brazilian guys. And so I said, yeah, sure. Because I can pick up on stuff and I do my homework religiously. I
Right.
listen to all the stuff, I
Right.
figure it out. So I got into Brazilian music. From that, I got called to be in the band. This was one of the most flattering things ever. Octavio Bailly, who went back to, he came from Brazil and he played with Sergio Mendes and everybody.
Right.
And he and
Right.
Claudio Sloan were the two guys in LA that played Brazilian. They were the guys to play Brazilian music, drums and bass, a generation older than me. And Octavio said, I'm starting a group. Do you want to be in it? And I thought, who? Wait, who?
Yeah.
Who are you talking to? And I joined his band.
Right.
So
Holy
it
moly.
was remarkable, and it was exciting, and it was such a great experience for me. Lucky, lucky,
Uh,
lucky. And
yeah.
from that, Claudio left the band, and Enzo came into the band. Enzo Tedesco drums. And when that gig ended, which was a year and a half, 5 nights a week, so, I decided, we've been playing together 5 nights a week. I need to record my stuff with these guys while
Right.
we're
Right.
hot,
Right. Right.
And so that's where that CD came from, and it's called Misbehavin'. That's like a little
Yes.
a play on, Ain't Misbehavin'.
Haven. Right.
And what that is, the title track. So the whole CD is Latin and
Right.
Latin jet, Brazilian, Latin oriented, except for the very last short little piece, which is a little solo piano piece. But
Which
everything
is
else is Latin.
which is absolutely beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
That solo piano piece, and that was for your two sons, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
Kevin and Eric, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, very cool. Yes.
I listened to it last evening, and I just closed my eyes, and I thought, wow, that is just some
Oh,
very good playing.
thank you, Bob.
Very good playing. It's beautiful. So okay, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to get that. I just wanted to get that in there. So go on.
Get that in there. Thank you. So the CD, I started the CD because, when you play in a group with the same guys for a long period of time, there's something that happens that can't happen any other way unless magically you get thrown in a group with some. So I really wanted to capitalize on that. So we did, I think, 5 tunes, and then life got in the way, and many years later, I thought I better finish this thing, and so I did. And fortunately, Octavio and Enzo were still around here, and they were able to play on the rest of the tracks. But I also have guests on there, like players that I know, including my husband, who is a fantastic reed player, Dick Mitchell. And he plays all the reed stuff, flute stuff, everything on there. But I had some great players, and the title track, Misbehavin', is a contrafact on Ain't Misbehavin', and it's a Brazilian shortinho kind of samba thing that I wrote on the changes for Ain't Misbehavin', and I featured Stacey Rolls on flugelhorn. Still to this day, one of my favorite players ever. She's gone now, but that's how that CD came along. And so I got to ask all my favorite players to play on it, and wrote most of the tunes. I did some arrangements on a couple things, but I'm really happy that I did that, documented that.
Well, it's fabulous. It's fabulous. I've like I said, I've been binging on it, and it's wonderful. I love Smile. Smile is awesome.
Thank you.
Really, really nice treatment. And now I'm curious: do your sons, Kevin and Eric, do they play? Are they musicians?
They're very musical, and they did play. But at this point in their lives, they're in their mid and late 20s. They're not professional musicians, but they're super musical, and they played for a long time. And they play for enjoyment and do other things, but they growing up in a house with 2 musicians, and they really couldn't get away from it. So they're great audiences, and they appreciate my older son, Kevin, always sends me music that he's listening to because he wants to keep me up on stuff that I probably wouldn't hear otherwise, and he's right. And they're both doing their own thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? You and your husband, professional musicians. Me and my wife, we're professional musicians, and our boys are baseball players. I was like, what the heck, But it's kind of funny. I love antagonizing them because I'll use musical terms with all their baseball talk. I'll say, hey man, when's the audition tonight? And
I do the same thing. I do the same.
Yeah, and they go, Dad, it's called a tryout. I say, okay, okay. Well, or I'll say, or I'll say, when's the rehearsal? And they go, Dad, it's called practice. I go, okay, all right.
Oh, I know. My younger son played baseball, and I use baseball terminology sometimes, or sports terminology in my teaching. In lots of ways, because baseball is baseball and books and nature. Besides music, give me baseball, books, and nature. And so sorry about the Dodgers this year, right?
Right. What happened there? So
I don't know.
Who knows, right? So, well, I'm right with you. So let's talk a little bit about education.